Vayishma Yisro Choyin Midyan Choysein Moshe Eis Kol Asher Asa Elokim LeMoshe L'Yisrael Amai Ki Yotzi Hashem Es Yisrael MiMitzrayim. Everyone knows what was it that Yisro heard. Rashi tells us that Yisro heard Kriyas Yamsuf U'Melchemes Amalek. Those are the two things he heard, and then he decided to become a Yid. And there's the famous question that everyone asks. What's pshat that Yisro heard? We know that everyone heard about Kriyas Yamsuf for sure. We know by Az Yashir it says Kol Yishvei Chenan. Everyone heard. Really, the whole world heard about Kriyas Yamsuf. So what's the emphasis that Yisro heard? Okay, a lot of the Mefarshim explain that it's because Yisro was the actual one who, although they all heard it, he was the first one to act upon it and to take it and move with it, and not just go kidarcha teva and just let it slide by. Which goes to show you that although one person came, that means that the rest of the world did not. It didn't do it. They went through Kriyas Yamsuf, Melchemes Amalek, and it didn't do anything to them. There's a pasuk in Tehillim. We say it actually, I think if you make a cheshbon 4 times a week. It says, we say it all the time, Mi yale b'har Hashem, u'mi yakum b'mkoim kodshay. Who is going to be oile, go up on the Har Hashem, and who is going to be stand b'makom kodshay, or is going to remain on the makom kodshay. So the Mefarshim explained this pasuk is talking about, it's 2 questions. One is who's going to be yale b'har Hashem, who's going to have an aliyah, who's going to have an isyrus to be oile, to get closer to Hashem. But then there's another question of umi yakum b'mkoim kodshay, who's going to be the one to remain b'makom kodesh. There's a lot of people have the hisyrus and they get excited and they want to do something different. But to be umi yakum b'mkoim kodshay means who's going to stand and actually remain kodesh, and who's going to actually, let that carry on. And we see this all the time, unfortunately. If you look back at your Kabbalahs, the papers, we have our Kabbalahs from Rosh Hashanah, or every Rosh Hashanah. So, unfortunately, very often it's the same one the next year, and the next year, and the next year. And then there's some times where we look back and there's actually excitement that, actually I can cross that off. That one actually I took on. I saw a Maisa with Mordechai Shapiro, Zatzal from Miami. He was here right after the Yom Kippur War. He was visiting Eretz Yisrael right after. And anyone who was here at the time, which looks like none of us, including myself, were there. Anyone who was there, though, apparently they say, was a very, very, difficult time. It was a time of a lot of hisyrus, but it was a time that was difficult. It was a difficult time where a lot of people had, there was a lot of casualties and a lot of injuries. And Rav Mordechai Shapiro decided while he was here, I think he was here on behalf of his shul in Miami, he was visiting, he wanted to go to the hospitals and to visit some of the people who had been injured or sick, or people who had been hurt. And as he was going from around the hospital beds to give chizuk, he got to the bed of someone who he saw was quite injured. He had burns on his body, and his name was Yechezkel, and he was a chayal who had been injured. And he said to Rav Mordechai Shapiro, he said, Harav, I want to tell you, probably said in Hebrew, I want to tell you the story of what happened with me. Tell me about my niece. Let me hear. He said to him, I was in my tank, and our tank was hit, and it was on fire. And while I was in the tank, I said to Hashem, if you save me from this, if I come out alive, then I'm going to put on tefillin. Okay? Rav Mordechai Shapiro says he doesn't know what caused him at that moment to ask this question. He said it probably was a little bit too intrusive, maybe a little bit too, intense. But he asked him at that time, he said, and how long do you plan to keep wearing that tefillin? And Yechezkel responded back and said, Chodesh, Chodshayim, I don't know, a month or 2. And Mordechai Shapiro was taken aback by that, and he right away said to him, he said, you can't just do it for a month or 2. You just had this, Hashem just saved you. You just had this niece that just occurred. How could you stop after a month or 2? And he didn't leave the room until Yechezkel promised that Ad Yom Moisa he's going to wear tefillin. But you see that the derech of the person is we have a service, we get excited, we do something for a little bit, and then eventually it wears off. The Medrash Tanchuma says in Parshas Tisaveh about the menorah, it says something very interesting. Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim says, Ani hayisi meshamish bebeis hamikdash. I used to work in the Beis Hamikdash, as we can imagine the Skana Kohanim would do. Umaysen nisim haya b'menorah. And I used to see these unbelievable nisim that would happen with the menorah. Mishahay madlikin haysa mi Rosh Hashanah. When they would light it from Rosh Hashanah, loy haysa miskaba ad shana acheres. It wouldn't extinguish until the next year, until next Rosh Hashanah. It would go the whole year. So I saw in his sefer, Mordechai Shapiro, in his sefer, Imre Mordechai, he had a beautiful take on this line. He said he doesn't think it's a coincidence that this was on Rosh Hashanah, and it's not a coincidence that we're talking about the menorah, because he said the menorah is something which represents the Eish HaTorah and Avodas Hashem. It's one of the avodas they did in the Beis Hamikdash. And Rosh Hashanah is a zman where we make all these kabbalos and we're trying to keep them going. And he says what Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim could be saying or referring to is that this Eish and the kabbalos, they went from Rosh Hashanah until the next Rosh Hashanah. They didn't stop. And he said what the avodah of every single yid is, every single person has, is there a mikdash ma'at, and everyone has an Eish inside them. And the question is, how long is that Eish you're going to let it burn? Are you going to let it go for a little bit and then stop? Or are you going to let it go the whole year until next Rosh Hashanah? You keep going and ad yom Moshe. So with that in mind, with this Iris, I wanted to address something which I think something could use chizuk a little bit by us, which hopefully I think is going back to tefillah. I think we could use a little bit chizuk in our tefillah. And I'll tell you when it hit me. It hit me, I was in Shemona Esrei one day, and I'll tell you, it was a very funny thing happened to me. I was davening Shemona Esrei, and all of a sudden, I thought I was davening mincha, but I realized I was in Shachris. Now, Baruch Hashem, the brachas are the same. But then I realized actually I was in mincha. But it happened to be punked that there was a large amount of us that were wearing our tefillin. I just was confused where I was. Then I realized I was in mincha. It can't be, it's not shaykh for Ben Torah to be matzliach. For Ben Torah to be matzliach, it can't be that he doesn't take his tefillah seriously. You'll never find anyone who is matzliach in learning, any gadol, anyone who comes to learn stark, but his tefillah doesn't matter to him. Tefillah is our everything. It's our connection to Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's the only way we matzliach in learning in and of itself. But it's also it's not an all on us. It's not something we should feel like I just want to get over with. It's actually a matana. It's a tremendous matana where we can ask for anything and we get results and incredible things happen through tefillah. If we don't have it, we're nothing. Well, there's different madregas. Everyone has a different madrega where they're holding in tefillah. So in order to make it more klalistic, I just want to point out, for some people it might be being mechazik, davening bichlal. For another person it might be davening bizman. That may be his challenge. Another person might be, I daven bizman, but I need to daven with a minyan. Okay? For some people it might be davening all of Psukei de Zimra when I'm at that minyan. I go to minyan every day, but Psukei de Zimra doesn't really happen. And for some people it might be halavai by all of us. It's I daven everything. I always get all Psukei de Zimra. I even get korbanos, but maybe I should get there early to davening, even a couple minutes early, like the Chassidim Rishonim. Each person kifi their darka, but everyone has to make a cheshbon of what can I do to make my davening better. And it's interesting. A lot of people feel I don't really connect with my tefillah. It's hard for me. I don't really. So the first question you have to ask yourself is, well, first of all, do you do it? And second of all, do you come on time? Because it's very hard to gauge if you want to make your tefillah better. If you're running in for 5 minutes and then you're running out in the last 10 minutes and you only have like a 3-minute davening. So yeah, it's hard to connect it because you didn't really do it. But if a person's actually sitting and davening, he's there from the beginning, he's there to the end, eventually you get used to it. Yes, it's a little hard, but eventually a person gets used to it and appreciates it. So I figure let's start with the best Sefer Musar out there. It's the Shulchan Aruch. So over here he says the following. Siman Sadi, Halacha Tes. Mechaber says the following. Says the Mechaber, Yishtadel Adam Lispalel Bebeis HaKnesses Im HaTzibur. A person should try to daven in shul with a tzibur. The Ramosha, the Igros Moshe, Rav Yashiv, and the Chavetz Chaim in Shmir Salashon actually all say that this is a chiyuv. And even the Mishnah Berurah brings this. The Mishnah Berurah says the following. First, he points out, what is Tefillah B'tzibur? What is that point? A lot of people make a mistake. They think Tefillah B'tzibur is catching Kaddish or Kedusha. But no. The Ikar Tefillah B'tzibur, hu Tefillah Shemain Esrei. The Ikar Tefillah B'tzibur is our Shemon Esrei, davening everyone together with Shemon Esrei. Dehainu Shispalu Asar Nashim Shehim Gedalim B'yachad. The 10 people are Gedalim davening together. V'loi K'may Shechayshvin Hamoin, that the Hamonam thinks She'ikar L'Spalel Ba'asar Hu Rak L'Shmaya Kaddish Ukdusha Uvarchu. Some people think, okay, I heard Kaddish, I heard Kedusha, I heard the Baruch at the end, I'm good to go. V'lachein Eina Makpidim Rakshiu Asar B'Beis HaKnesses B'Zeu Tos. V'lachein, here's the words we have to hear. Chayiv ala Adam. It's a chiv on the person, l'maher lavay l'beis haknesses, kedei sheyagia l'spalel shemain esrei b'tzibur. In order that person should hear tefillah, should daven tefillah b'tzibur. Of course, eintzim occur. Everyone has. There's a whole simon in Shulchan Aruch about what to do when you come in later. Things like that. But an oinus has to be an oinus. It has to be a real oinus. That's what the Mechaber is telling us. It doesn't mean if it's happening too often, it means it's not oinus anymore. It means there's something wrong with our schedule. It's interesting, there's even a Tshuva Radvaz, the Tshuva of the Radvaz, I think it's brought, Kabish Burim brings it, where the Radvaz was asked the following question. If a person was in jail, and he was given, they told him, you can have one day where we'll let you daven Tefillah B'tzibur. So he asked the Radvaz, should I do it, should I ask him for Purim or Yom Kippur? And the Radvaz famously writes back, and says, neither. You ask for the first tefillah you can get right now. Do that tefillah b'tzibur right now. Get that first one you can chop and take it. Don't push off this mitzvah. And if you want to see the milas, if that's not enough to understand, if you want to see the milas of tefillah b'tzibur, ayin in the Shmir Salashon where he goes on a barichas about 6 different things that happen, especially by davening with a tzibur, not alone. It's an incredible story. The Panovich Arav, in the beginning when he used to collect money for Panovich, so it was very hard. In those days, it was right after the war. People did not want to give, especially to a yeshiva, and people thought he was crazy. But he would travel, he would go door to door. And on one of his trips, he went to Frankfurt, Germany, and he was actually, the way he would go was, he would knock on doors to ask for money for the yeshiva. And more often than not, it would be a slamming of the door in his face. So that had been going on for a couple doors in a row while he was in Frankfurt, and he didn't stop him, he just kept going. And finally got to one door, and this person said, it's not a kavadik for the Rav to have to be knocking on doors. Why don't we arrange that you can meet with the people who have people who are more financially capable, and this way you don't have to keep knocking on doors. I'll tell you and make appointments for then you can come to their house. So the Panovich Rav accepted the offer. Made a lot more sense and less of a bizayon. He said, "Thank you so much," and the man said, "We'll do that." And the man called him back and told him about all his scheduling, and one of them was the real gvir that he needed to get to was this person who had a tremendous amount of financial abilities, and he told him you have an appointment with him, go to his house, and you can meet with him. So he goes to his house. Panovich Rav gets to his house. They start talking. He shows him the plans of the yeshiva, what he has envisions, and what he needs. And the man, kedarkum b'kaidish, sometimes people are very willing to give their money, and sometimes they make it a little bit more difficult. You got to earn it a little bit. So this gvir says to the Panovich Rav, yeah, I could potentially help. Tomorrow, if you come meet me in the morning, I'm taking the 8 o'clock train, and I'm going to be gone for business for a couple of weeks. But if you meet me at 7:45 before the train, then I'll be able to. I'll help you out. We can be masad or something. Panovich Rav says, "Thank you so much." Goes back to his house, and the Panovich Rav says the next morning he wakes up, and something very strange happens to him. He oversleeps, and he says he overslept for the first time in his life, and he woke up at 7. That was his oversleeping, and he woke up at 7, and he says at that point he quickly started getting dressed. And he decided at that moment that tefillah he'll daven b'yechidus because when it comes to Torah of the Rabbim versus one day of davening not b'tzibur, l'chayr that which should take precedence. And he starts getting dressed and on his way out, and then he says he remembers there's a medrash that medrash says, and I'll quote the medrash. It says the following lashon: Ein adam shomeali umafsid. There's a medrash rabbi that says the Kodesh Baruch Hu says there's no one who listens to me and loses out. So Panovich Rav says he was miskaber at that moment. He said, no, I'm going to daven tefillah b'tzibur, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will send me the money somewhere else. And he goes to the minyan at the 7:30 minyan, and the minyan is over at 8:30. And at 8:30, he says, okay, I don't know where this money's going to come from, but you know what? Maybe it's Kedai just to go to the train station. You never know. So he walks over, 10-minute walk to the train station. It's 8:40, and he gets there. He's looking around, and there's actually nothing really doing. Like, no one's looking for him. He's just waiting there and doesn't know what's going to happen. And at 5 minutes later, 8:45, lo and behold, there's someone running towards him. And who is it? The man, the Gvir, at 8:45. And he comes running to the Panovich Rav, and he says to him, Rav, I'm so sorry. I had a crazy onus. This never happens to me. We had a crazy thing in our family, and I'm sorry I made you wait for an hour. Here, take this check and put extra money into it. He puts it, and it was enough to cover the issue for 6 months. And he hands the Panovich Rav this money. And the Panovich Rav said, I learned from this, not only does the Kadosh Baruch Hu not make us be mafsid, but I was marviach. Because had I gone at the original intention, Dam B'chidis, and met him there, I would have waited there for 20, 30 minutes, and then I would have left. I would have said, the guy, something must have came up. But because I did my tefillah b'tzibur and I waited there, Kadosh Baruch Hu helped me be marviach. And we have to appreciate that tefillah is a matana. It's our only way to be matzliach. The Sefer Chasidim says, even when it comes to learning, the lashon of the Sefer Chasidim is in Kuf Lamed Aleph. He says, Im shayel adam davar shu shevach lebayray. If someone asks for something which is a praise to Kadosh Baruch Hu, kigoyin alim Torah, oy davar acher michevtei shemayim, or anything else which is something which is ruchniistic, v'shayfech es nafshay elav, HaKadosh Baruch Hu shemei tefillah, so Hashem will listen to your tefillah, af al pi she'ein biyadoi maisim tovim. Even if you don't have maisim tovim, even if you're not a person who deserves it, through tefillah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can be mizaki you. The Chavetz Chaim once shared a story of two Jews from 150, 200 years before him. That there was this person walked into his shul on Shabbos afternoon. It was right after his meal at lunch. And he goes to his shul, and that's usually a pretty quiet time if you go to shul at that time, because that's usually our menucha time. And he walked into the shul, and there's only one other yid in that room. And he sees that other yid who's there is in front of his tehillim, and he's mamish crying in front of his tehillim. And this goes on for 1 hour, for 2 hours, and for 3 hours, the whole Shabbos afternoon. And this first person who walked in, because of that, was so mushba that he was brought to tears. And he said, I need to find out what is it that this guy was davening for. So after Shabbos, he goes over to him and he says to him, what was it that you were davening for? What was it that you were crying so much for? And he said, I'll tell you. He said, I have a daughter who's in Shidduchim, and unfortunately, we have no money, and we can't afford to marry her off. And the whole week, I work to try to make a parnasa, and I'm not home. I go away for the whole week, and I come back, and I have nothing still to my name. And I come back, and I see her at the Shabbos table, and it causes me so much tsar that I just come Shabbos straight to the shul just to cry to Hashem. And the man who was there says to him, he says, I also have a child. I have a son in Shidduchim. Kind of do this how the story's going to go, but we'll hear in a second. That my son, I also have a son in Shidduchim, and I also have no money. And they said, why don't we make a shidduch together? And from that shidduch came the famous Ksais HaChayshin and the Kuntres HaSfekis and their two other brothers. From that shidduch, from their tefillah, from davening to Kadosh Baruch Hu. Everyone's looking for a different segula. What can I do to help? I have this issue, I have that issue. I have so many different things that are causing me problems, and they're always trying to figure out different ways. But we go around the boat and avoid just talking to the Rebbeinu Shalom directly. I think it's, if I could say, the best school out there is just davening to Hashem, davening to Kadosh Baruch Hu, being mispalel, and asking Kadosh Baruch Hu for help. So one more Maisa. Sorry about all the Maisa, but just one more Maisa. Rav Pincus was once in the airport in Europe. He was on a stopover flight. And he's about to board his plane. They start calling for boarding, so everyone's lined up and they're getting closer to the plane. And Rav Pincus notices that there's one yid, chashuv looking yid in the corner, who is in the middle of Shmon Esrei. And he catches Rav Pincus' eye, and he's watching this man daven. And this person is mamish davening b'hislavus. He's fully in it. And as he's watching, they announce, 5 minutes till we close the gates. The man's still going. Nothing didn't even affect him b'chlal. still davening, and he notices that this man, when he looks closer, is nobody other than the famous Mashgiach Rav Dan Segel Shlita. And Rav Dan Segel in Yerushalayim, Arayam Azeh, you can go meet him. And Rav Dan is there davening Shemona Esrei, and he notices that nothing's not budging, and they announce 2 minutes. And he says, Rav Pinkus decides at that moment, you know what, if Rav Dan's going to miss the flight, I want to miss it with him. So he waits and watches Rav Dan davening Shemona Esrei, and they announce final boarding call, and Rav Pinkus says it was hard for him to restrain, but Rav Dan's doing it, I'm going to do it too, and he waits there, and he watches about 5 minutes past this already, and Rav Dan finally finishes the Shemona Esrei, and then looks at his watch, sees it's a bit late, but no, he's got to do Aleinu. And he starts davening Aleinu. And finally his Aleinu is over, and he notices Rav Pinkus, and I guess they knew each other because he quickly grabs Zohar and says, oh, come, let's go on to the plane. Now, Pinkus didn't have the heart to tell him, the plane's gone. So he puts his arm in arm with Rav Pinkus, and they're walking, and Rav Pinkus is walking with him, and they get closer, and lo and behold, the door is open. The plane is still open. They get onto the plane, and he says, the way he writes the story is that within 2 minutes the door was closed. And they found out later what happened, that someone on the plane saw a suspicious looking item on the plane. He told the flight attendant. The flight attendant was too afraid and worried to deal with it himself. He then called the security of the airport who had to come and deal with it. And during that time being was when Rav Dan was davening Shemona Esrei, until they removed it and saw it was just a bag. While they were in midair and the plane's in the air, Pinkus was just wondering. He went over to Rav Dan and he asked him, I just want to know, is that really, are we really mechuyev to daven like that? Like, I understand, shouldn't we speed up if we know, let's say a plane is about to leave, can't we just speed up our tefillah a little bit and daven our Shemona Esrei a little quicker, so this way we don't miss it, and especially if it's going to cause now, there's going to be more bittul Torah because you're going to miss this flight. And Rav Dan looked at him and grabbed, and he held his arm and he said to him with a smile, he's like, it could be you're right. He's like, I push it while I was davening, I was having so much hana, I was enjoying it so much, I didn't realize time passing. I was enjoying my tefillah so much. We have to chap that our davening is the ultimate pleasure, it's a tainuk, and it's only to feel. And it's something instead of running away from, we should run to, and it's something we should enjoy. And my bracha is that we should be zayche to use this service only to grow more and more. Each person kifi their derech of what they're working on in their tefillah, mitzvah Hashem.
We really hope that you're able to grow and enjoy with this amazing content that we just put together. Do us a favor. Don't just make it about you and me. Share this with the world. Get that Torah out there for everyone to see. Additionally, if you want to hear more, which we hope you do, you can subscribe to our content so that you can be up to date with all of the new amazing Torah that we have here in the yeshiva, pumping it out to you as the klal.